Hello. Welcome to a webinar of the Turkey program of the Hellenic Foundation of European Foreign Policy. My name is Ioannis Grigoriadis. I'm the head of the program, and I have the honor and the pleasure today to chair and participate in a panel presenting Erdi Öztürk's latest book. Erdi has been a colleague in the Turkey program, a very enthusiastic and very prolific scholar that has been contributing greatly to the activities of the program. So today we're going to discuss his book on Turkey's foreign policy in the Balkan through the angle of religion. Erdi has conducted research in Albania, in North Macedonia and Bulgaria, and tried to draw some conclusions about how religion has played into the making of Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans, and what this tells us in general about the relationship between religion and politics and religion and foreign policy. So together with me is also Professor Ioannis Armakolas, who is the head of the Southeast Europe program at ELIAMEP. So he knows the region very, very well. We will be commenting for about 10 to 15 minutes on some of the most important points of the book. And then we'll give the floor to Erdi to respond to these points. And then we'll have time for questions. So within 60 minutes, we hope to wrap everything together. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Ioannis Armakolas so he can make his points and his initial observations on what this book is bringing into the discussion on Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans and religion and politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni. I see many people who are mostly familiar with Turkish politics or Turkish foreign policy, not many people working on Southeast Europe or the Western Balkans, which is good. I think we can have a very interesting discussion, the two sides of this story. Well, Ed is a friend and Ioannis is a friend, so it's not easy to praise friends, but I will praise, of course, the book, because as Ioannis said, Ed is not only enthusiastic and prolific, but he has the tendency to deal with very interesting and timely topics, but deal with them in a meticulous and insightful way. And this is what also I found in his book. I thought it was a very interesting approach to a very quite complicated and fluid topic in the sense that it's happening as we speak. And I have to say, I must say that I learned plenty of things about, especially about Turkey, rather than the Western Balkans. I will not summarize the book because we don't have much time. I thought the idea of Turkey being an ambiguous actor in Southeast Europe is interesting. It's fascinating, in fact. And I found the dynamics of state identity and how politics, culture, and identity and the role of religion, as they change in Turkey, change also Turkish foreign policy and relations of Turkey with certain, with all Balkan countries. I thought this was a very interesting discussion and a fascinating approach. I think I will try as soon as possible, as briefly as possible, maybe touch upon four themes. One is the strengths or the advantages of the book, apart from the obvious things we know about the work that Erdi Öztürk has been doing for several years. First and foremost, I think it's, and it goes without saying, but we should still stress it, that this is a very timely and interesting book. I mean, it touches upon a number of things that we come across every day in the media, every day in the policy agenda of our governments, every day in the policy challenges that we study as academics. So it's religion, it's the identity, it's of course Turkish foreign policy or Turkish actorness, which is not what it used to be in relation to Western allies, in relation to the West in general, or in relation to its neighbors. So this is something this is the book that all the journalists that write about Turkey every day should read, I guess, because this is actually, Erdi actually deals with this the most timely issues. Second strength of the book, I thought, is a very good knowledge, and this was particularly useful for me, a very good knowledge of the Turkish background. We have the tendency, of course, us dealing with the Western Balkans to focus on Turkey, but without necessarily delving deeper into Turkish history, Turkish domestic politics, identity questions, conflicts, competitions in Turkey, and how these influence the external environment of Turkey. And for me, this was the most fascinating part, and the one that was most informative, because it touched upon issues that I didn't know well. So it's a very good knowledge of the Turkish background, the politics, the ideology, the identity questions, and more importantly, the dynamics of the identity transformations, the political dynamics. So it's all about how all these things change rather than being static. Another interesting point, or rather strength of the book, I would say, is the selection of case studies. And here, I think Erdi mentions it at some point in the book. There is a tendency in the last decade or so, or even maybe longer, to focus almost exclusively on what we call today the Western Balkans, which is a very recent and very constructed term, constructed by the European Union. Didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. But the selection of the cases by Erdi, of course, brings together very different cases and very interesting cases. A country that is Christian majority neighboring to Turkey, but a member of the EU. Another country that is Christian majority that is not a member of the EU. A Muslim country that is that has a very delicate and intricate relationship with religious identities, and so on and so forth. So this, I thought it was very interesting, because the way that Erdi brought together in his different chapters the experience of Turkey in each of these countries made for very interesting comparisons that are not readily and frequently found in the literature of the Western Balkans. He presents both sides of the story in a very insightful way, both Turkey's background, Turkish foreign policy, etc., but also Western Balkans and the reception of the Turkish policies, or the Western Balkan sensitivities, and so on and so forth. And of course, there's plenty of very interesting empirical data in the form of interviews and field work that was done by Erdi. Now, I will very briefly mention a couple of things I thought were very interesting. I found fascinating the four themes around which Erdi discusses the presence of Turkey and the way this presence is understood, received in Balkan countries, which is the service to the global Ummah, the exploitation of domestic conflicts with, of course, with Gülen movement, interfering in domestic politics in host countries, and destabilizing the secular order of these countries. Each one of these four themes, four elements, I think could very well be a book on its own, Erdi. But I thought you summarized them quite well, despite the fact that each country, as you very nicely demonstrated, is very different from the rest. And if you would include, for example, Serbia or Bosnia-Herzegovina or Kosovo, it would make it even richer, and it would make, rather than 6 very different cases. But overall, I found the way you organize this material very something very interesting. And then, of course, coming again from the studies of Southeast Europe, but knowing, of course, the competition between the Turkish state and the Gülen movement in these countries, or knowing to some extent, I guess, I found the background of this, and also the dynamics that you described, very interesting. Very interesting in the sense that we saw something that is theoretically informed, something that we know from the literature, but it's very interesting when you see it in its empirics and in actual case studies, which is, of course, a competition between a state, or the power of the state, and the transnational religious or non-state movement that has religious references. Let's put it this way. And this is, of course, very interesting. And it, as this is a book that is about things that are ongoing, the jury is still out about who will win. But I think you imply that probably the Turkish state eventually will win this battle over a non-state, a powerful non-state actor. And this is, I think, very interesting. And this discussion and many other things in the book will be fascinating read for scholars that do not deal with Turkey, do not deal with Southeast Europe, but only the idea of competition between state and non-state powers or state and non-state actors. I think will brings very interesting insights in the literature. There are a couple of and there are many actually, but I will focus only on two myths that are dispelled in the book. I know that Erdi has not phrased his arguments in that way, but being Greek, being very familiar with Greek debates and the way Greeks think about Turkey and the region, I thought you provide some very interesting insights that would be very useful for Greek policymakers and also scholars. So what kind of, I mean, as I said, you have many arguments that could dispel myths, but two of them are very interesting, I thought. And I will try to mention them very briefly. Hyperactivism and real footprint. Like in Greece, we always, as you know very well, are extremely concerned about Turkey, what Turkey is doing. In fact, to a large extent, our foreign policy is very much dependent on addressing the Turkey problem, not only directly, but also indirectly in different parts of the world. And what you saw in your book is that it's a very superficial way of understanding international foreign policy. Like it's not only, or it's not so much about the volume of activity or how much activity a country has, but it is very important to take into account, and sometimes more important, what the activity is or the content of this foreign policy activism. And this is very beautifully, I think, illustrated in the book, in the sense, especially when you show how this hyperactivism and new content that Turkey under AKP in recent years bring in its activity in the region actually dismantles previous accomplishments of Turkish foreign policy, which is fascinating. Because of course, coming from Greece, it's all homogeneous bad, you know, it's always very negative, it's always very powerful, it's always something we need to counter. But of course, you provide some nuance that dispel myths and shows that, well, the content there at the moment is actually doing possibly more harm than good to its own Turkish foreign policy or national interest, and it's actually undermining some achievements that Turkey managed back in the 1990s, which I think it's very interesting, fascinating, I would say. Second, very quickly, and this is not new, but it is, I think, a contribution to a growing literature in the Balkans, showing how Balkan countries, rather than being, or even the Muslim populations within Balkan countries, rather than being weak actors that are passive receivers of Turkish influence or other influence, Russian, Chinese, etc., are actually actively negotiating this influence, actively resisting sometimes, actively accepting or adapting this influence. This, I think, a very interesting direction of research. It's not new, but it is not as prominent, as salient as other previous approaches about foreign influence in the region or non-Western influence in the region, which shows the region as being extremely passive and weak, and only introducing or only accepting these influences. In fact, as we very well know, each actor within the countries is actually negotiating this kind of influences from Turkey, but also from other actors like Russia and China. And of course, the way that these are negotiated is conditioned on the power of its country, its alliances, like whether it's EU member or not, its foreign policy interests, but also its history, identity, and the way, as we have seen in the example of Albania, for example, the way that domestic elites negotiate the state identity of the receiver country, not the Turkey that has been the main focus of the book, of course. If I have a couple of more minutes, Ioannis, do I have? Yeah. I will mention, because being obsessed with the Balkans, I would like to see more Balkan stuff. Indeed. I learned a lot from the Turkey part of the book, but I would really have liked to see more Balkan, Western Balkan, or rather Balkan dimensions of the analysis. More context, more delving deeper into the issues and the disputes and the conflicts and the actorness of the actors and the actorness in the Balkans. So I will very, very briefly mention several, not weaknesses or limitations, but rather avenues of future research, because I think this is a big project that contributes a lot to the literature, and you should continue it. One is, I already mentioned how the actors receive the influence and negotiate the influence and change and adapt, etc. This, in a recent paper of mine, I have called inside-out dimension, because it's not what the objective nature of external influence, but rather how this is perceived, negotiated, etc. Because you have used constructivism in your book in a nice way, by the way. So it's not so much Turkish influence, but Turkish influence is what states and other actors make of it, as Wendt would put it. And this is very, very interesting, of course, because it adds so much nuance to Turkish, the study of Turkish politics and everything around it. It's not so much the objective power that is projected by Turkey, but also how all these are understood and negotiated. Second point, I think I would like to see more focus on domestic actors. You focus a lot on domestic actors, but there is so many levels of actorness in each of these countries that you mentioned. Within Muslim communities, for example, in Albania, it would be very interesting to see how the Turkish influence is negotiated, or the reactions and the interests of different Muslim actors, or different parties for that matter. Socialist Party and its leader that has this special connection to Erdogan, Democratic Party in North Macedonia, the right-wing party, the left-wing party, Albanians, but Turks. So there is all sorts of different actors and different agendas there. There's a very interesting recent study, for example, in Sanjak, which is not part of your book, that shows the multiplicity of actorness in the Sanjak region, in the borders between Serbia and Montenegro, and how Turkish presence and Turkish influence becomes an issue of domestic competition within the Sanjak region by different actors, depending on their agendas, depending on their interests, depending on their relationship to the authorities in Belgrade, or the access they have to Turkish resources. So all this is extremely rich at the local level or at the national level, and you could pursue this further, including identity issues. For example, the Albanian identity issues are very, very extremely interesting. The laicite, the laiclic of Albania, when it confronts the former laic Turkey that is now not anymore a laic, but it's a religious actor. And this is extremely interesting, of course. Foreign policy considerations, I missed that a bit in the book. Albania, North Macedonia, for example, apart from the obvious connections to Turkey, religious elements, history, etc., there is the element of competition with Greece, and it would be interesting to see to what extent Turkey counterbalances in the imagination, in the ideas of political elites in these two countries, counterbalances the Greek influence or the Greek pressure on both countries. More recently, of course, things have changed, but this is an important consideration. And European integration is another element that I think could be elaborated more. in the context of reforms, democratic backsliding, not in Turkey, but in the countries of the Western Balkans, and how the pressures or the influences that these countries have from the European Union and the demands they have from the European Union have an interplay with Turkey, and Turkey being these days and very uncertain and not aligned with the EU or the West actor. I think you should not see these as weaknesses, but rather as avenues for further research. I really enjoyed the book. And I learned a lot, as I said, and I look forward to, in fact, a more interesting scholarly interaction between Turkey studies and Western Balkans or Southeast Europe studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni, very much for your presentation. Let me follow up on some of the points you made for for about 10 minutes, so we can give then the floor to Erdi to respond. I do agree that the book is a very important and valuable contribution to the literature on Turkish foreign policy in the Western Balkans and in the Balkans in general. Bulgaria isn't considered to be a Western Balkan country. And of course, it is also timely because we live in the era of identity politics. Identity matters a lot, not only in Southeast Europe or in the Middle East. We see how identity features in UK politics, in American politics. And of course, religion remains a pool of crucial symbolic resources in all these countries, more or less. So in that respect, it's interesting to see how this whole discussion about secularization and the end of religion in politics or in the public sphere plays into that. So Turkey is not more, or is not, maybe has never been alone in that, but we can see the relevance of religion in domestic and foreign policy once again. So I do think that this is a very important parameter to consider. As Ioannis mentioned, looking into how the mechanics and the dynamics of Turkish foreign policy helps dispel some stereotypes that exist. And Ioannis mentioned to some positive stereotypes that exist in Greece about Turkish foreign policy. It's always very strategically oriented, very well planned. I think just thinking about how much investment the Turkish state has put on the Gülen movement over the decades, because we do need to remember that the Gülen movement was active, but it was working as an instrument of the Turkish state to a very large degree in all these countries for decades. So all this infrastructure that was built with like government support from Turkey is now been dismantled, and the new structure, of course, is established to replace this, but definitely this is a big waste of resources and infrastructure from the Turkish point of view. I do think that looking into Turkey's role in the Balkans sheds some light for another very, very important discussion that we're having in the European Union today, which is the position of Turkey and Turkish Islam in Western Europe. So, of course, the context is quite different, because the memory of the Ottoman Empire and positive or negative connotations of it are very strong when we talk about Turkey's relations with any Balkan country, including Greece, whereas the relevance of this narrative is weaker when it comes to Western Europe, whereby Turkey is a country that sends immigrants and is a country which is an important trade partner. So the framing of the relationship is quite different. Maybe Austria is the only country where the two things meet. So Austria has some Ottoman experience, that the Ottoman Empire meant something to the to the collective identity of Austrians. At the same time, Austria is one of the countries with the highest number of Turkish immigrants. So in that respect, has a unique position. The book raises a very important and interesting discussion on the question of soft power. Of course, discussions on religion and politics very often lead to discussing soft power. How can a country or an institution persuade somebody to do what it wants without coercion? And of course, it's considered to be extremely important instrument of foreign policy. Turkey has been claiming to become a soft power actor in the region and beyond the region for some time. I would say that this was one of the key themes of the 2000s. So let's say the good years of the Party administration, where Turkey was appearing to be successful in economics, in democratization reform, and it had a very strong appeal to a growing number of countries in Southeastern Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, and elsewhere. So, of course, under these circumstances, links with Turkey, cultural links or religious links with Turkey appear to be an additional asset. And it played into the narrative that like Ahmet Davutoğlu framed as advisor to Prime Minister Erdogan and then as foreign minister of the country. So in that respect, the book contributes to that discussion. However, I would like to raise my first question here, because the book raises how important the soft power narrative was for Turkey in the Southeast, in the Balkans. But my question is, how much did this really have to do with religion and not with Turkey's success story as it appeared to be in between the 2000s, early 2000s and late in the first decade of our century? So was it Sunni Islamic bonds that brought Turkey closer to Albania or to Bosnia-Herzegovina, or made Turkey a more appealing partner to North Macedonia or to Bulgaria? Or was it Turkey's economic and political rising star at the time? Was it a combination of the two? And how can we distinguish between the two? I think that's an important point to keep in mind and think, because right now we can argue that Turkey's position has changed substantially. Turkey is no more applying soft power. It's becoming a hard power actor. Like, it has sent troops to a number of countries in its neighborhood, and there's no shining star shining from the side of Turkey to Southeastern Europe or in the Middle East. Turkey is full of problems in its economy and in its politics. So I think that's an important point to consider when we think about how the soft power discussion relates to Turkey. I think what is also very important in the discussion of Erdi's book is how this soft power influence becomes operationalized. What is the role of state actors like the Diyanet and non-state actors like the tarikats? And the Gülen movement was one, but we can argue that there are other instruments, other institutions that may have played or might be playing a role now. And I think that this is an important point to consider, because as we witness sometimes in Western Europe, whereby many of the domestic problems of Turkey become reflected on the communities, on the immigrant communities of Turkey in these countries, I think it's important to think, and the book is offering a very interesting introduction to this, I think. How do the domestic religious or political dynamics in Turkey affect the domestic dynamics of the Islamic communities in Albania or in Bulgaria or in North Macedonia? How do sometimes actors within the Turkish state follow an agenda which is not necessarily identical with the official agenda? So this is something that I think needs to be discussed. And I think even looking into the case of Greece would give some interesting insights into this. So there have been those who follow the situation of the minority in Thrace would argue that very often there would be different and not parallel policies by different state actors in Turkey as far as the minority was concerned. So I think this is quite an important dimension. Of course, we can talk about here a question that I find very interesting is a question referring to heterodox Islam. Albania is a country with a strong Bektashi tradition. So it would be interesting to, like, the book introduce a discussion, but I think it's important to stress how important Turkey's role is in the domestic Albanian or North Macedonian or Bulgarian dynamics between different Islamic denominations, and to what extent Turkey tries to consolidate a Sunni hegemonic position against its communities. So That's another important point in my opinion. And of course, I do think that the book helps us think again about how Islam is understood in a number of Southeast European countries, and opens a discussion, which I think is also very important, to think how the other communities, the majority communities in North Macedonia or in Bulgaria or in Greece or in Serbia, look into the same issue. Because of course the book looks into the Muslim communities of the Balkans, which are remnants of the Ottoman Empire. And of course, this historic link becomes a source of affinity and a source of bonding under certain circumstances. Of course, the opposite is the phenomenon when it comes to the majority communities in Serbia or in Greece. But as Erdi has highlighted, all this is about constructed identity. So constructivism is the theme, the analytical theme of the book, and I agree with his choice in that respect. So it would be interesting in another project to see how these dynamics affect the way that the Greeks or the Serbs or the Bulgarians look into the Ottoman past. Because it does play a crucial role in how public opinions view Republican Turkey. And of course, what has happened in the last years with Turkey engaging in an excessive use of Ottoman symbols, this sort of the development of the cult of personality around the president of the country, supports the argument that the late Ottoman Empire and contemporary Turkey are not as far as somebody who had read the history of Republican Turkish reform under Atatürk would have argued. So the book offers some interesting insights in that respect. So I would like to conclude here to allow time for Erdi to respond to the points we raised and let the audience also participate if they wish. So thank you very much, Erdi, for inviting me to this event, and I look forward to your points and our discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ioannis and ELIAMEP to host all of this event. But before starting to speak a little bit about your questions, your comments, and about, look, let me underline 2 points. The first thing is that I have a 16-month-old daughter, and she's new habit is to kick off our modem box. So if there is an instability in my Wi-Fi, this is the lack of my father knows to keep the modem away. This is the first thing. Sorry for that. The second thing is that, I mean, this is, if I'm not mistaken, my 9th book event, and I've been like speak a lot about the foreign officers with the academics, but this is the first time I saw some names, likewise Ersin Kalaycıoğlu, Kemal Kirişçi, Ahmet Evin. This is like a job talk or a vibe. It's a kind of a vibe with that highly respectful scholars. And thank you so much for your time. And also I saw Günter'in here. I was very much used his works, and also Uğur Ekinci is here. I used his works a lot during my research. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, before starting to speak a little bit about your questions, I got a couple of not criticism, but comments regarding the different parts of the books and regarding the country case selection and so on and so forth. First of all, what I try to do with this brand new book, I mean, this is not brand new anymore. It has been 6 months, pretty much. But what I try to do, getting Turkey and some of the particular Balkan countries as a country case, and as a testing ground, I actually try to scrutinize the intercollected structure of religion, identity, and power. And as Jonathan Fox underlined in his generous endorsement, I argued that this study is a little bit beyond the borders of Turkey and the Balkans. Yes, I know with the marketing department's selection of the cover photo, it is the heart of the Turkey's studies series right now. But I mean, what I argued in this book, as an instinct part of an identity, religion, not only Islam, has the capacity to shape the domestic politics, different kind of power relations, and at the end of the day, state identities. Therefore, religion, and particularly religion-oriented power struggles, to the extent that it forms part of a state identity, therefore, it can easily shape domestic politics, and then due to the intersectionality between domestic politics and foreign policy, it may affect countries' presence, countries' activities, and countries' desires regarding to the foreign countries, even if the actors and the decision makers are themselves secular or not that religious. So the establishment and the transformation process of the state identity start from domestic level via both leadership effects and the different critical junctions after many different struggles among different ideological camps. And these transformations can be very visible, not only every single part of the countries, but particularly some parts of the world based on the hierarchies between countries. And within this theoretical argument, I thought Turkey would be a good example to read its history via focusing on religion and the religion-oriented ideological and the power-based camps competitions. So, I mean, in front of these scholars, I will not speak about the Turkish political history because I learned from them. But what I can say that, first of all, one part of the book is try to read it, starting from the late Ottoman Empire to the contemporary time of Turkey. Try to read the Turkish history, not only domestic politics, but also foreign policy together, while focusing on religion and identity and power competitions. And at the end of the day, what I ended up, currently Turkey, like many other countries all around the world, gradually withdrawing from old world's international cooperation, and it's restoring a new distinction between previously understanding of civilization by synthesizing very objective reading of nationalism with a very nostalgic vision of history, memory, and Sunni Islam. Indeed, this transformation has been going on under the control of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. But what I argued that he has never been alone within this transformation. And while I was writing the book, he has some unofficial and unconventional coalition partners, such as some Islamist groups, not very compatible with the national outlook movement, nationalists, and Eurasianists, now under the shadow of Sedat Peker. This is a very gloomy question, but this finding out a kind of a transformation in the Turkish state identity, even though I know some studies underline that Turkey has been getting stronger and independent and being a game changer while increasingly addressing the global audiences. In the book, I academically, not in a journalistic or with a political discourse, I reject this idea, since from my reading, the transformation of Turkey's state identity under Erdogan rule had been undoubtedly creating a jargoning effect. And within this effect and within this transformation, whether it is instrumental, whether it is an instrument or a use of an objective, Sunni Islam has been playing a dominant role within this process. Indeed, in the Turkish case, the reconciliation and instrumentalization of Sunni Islam, combining with nationalism and the right-wing populism and aggressive foreign policy, is not in the first time, is not occurring in the first time, but this is something very visible. And what I saw that, despite of very positive effects of this transformation, I tried to show that Turkey's coercive ethno-nationalist Sunnification of its state identity has been creating different kind of problems within the different Balkan countries. And as first Ioannis, Armakolas underlined that, despite of very positive views, I found, four problematic issues. The first one is that service to the global ummah. Despite of all other activities, when we look at the investments of Turkey, and beyond that, when you go to the region and conduct surveys, conduct interviews, in-depth interviews with the elites, for example, Bektashis, a little bit of Jews, and also the Christians, you can see that the majority of the investments, one way or another, directly or indirectly, visibly or invisibly, is only according to the Sunni Islamic groups who are in a unconventional with the Justice and Development Party government, or Erdogan's unconventional coalition partners in domestic politics. This is something problematic, and this will exterminate the quote-unquote fluffy picture of the Turkey's flashing soft power, particularly religious soft power. Because even though what we know that this religious soft power is a kind of an abstract and a kind of a blurry concept, we know that there are some normative and material resources of soft power. But in the literature, for example, particularly talking about Turkey and the Balkans, we only focus on the normative side of the religious soft power. No, there is also one material part of the soft power, which is quite different than the sharp or a hard power. And this was a gap in the literature, and I think I managed to feel a little bit part of this gap. The second thing is that, I mean, in Turkey, I'm trying to watch the Turkey from the UK right now, but in Turkey, there is a big battle between Gülen movement and the Justice and Development Party. And within this battle, whether you call it's a fetter or hizmet, it's not matter for me because I'm an academic. I mean, this battle seems to be over in Turkey, but this is one of the biggest indicators in the Balkans, particularly North Macedonia, Albania, and Bulgaria. And this battle has been affecting all of the presence of Turkey, because Turkey, to eliminate the impact of the Gülen movement, started creating different kind of cooperations with some other Islamic groups. They're not all the moderate Islamic groups. And this will also relating to Turkey's religious soft power image. The third one is that, why using religion institutions? And this might be the answer of the Ioannis question regarding how non-state religious actors are being active in the region. What I saw in the region after living in the Balkans around 4 years and conducting more than 1,000 interviews, and more than 130 are elite interviews, there is no religious actors in the field that doesn't have any direct or indirect relations with Turkish government or Turkish state structures. So there is no civic Islam in the Balkans when we talk about the when we put Turkey on the subject. And within these actors, Turkey interfering the internal affairs of the countries, and this is exactly a big transformation of the Turkish foreign policy. Within this regard, I mean, we know Turkey has been trying to divide historical Turkish and the Muslim-originated political parties and civil society groups into two pieces. And this has started to be a kind of a security problem for the Balkan countries. Indeed, Turkey is not that external actor because of the shared past, not the history, because they are reading the history very differently than the Turkish books or the Turkish mainstream reading, but they've been sharing the same past, relatively same language, relatively same reading of Islam. But still, when we saw that Turkey is a kind of a very friendly international actor, but with this kind of interfering the internal affairs of the countries, Turkey has been changing its friendly image while using Islam, while using Turkishness, and while using the so-called very hard to so-called and difficult to understand concept, which is neo-Ottomanism. The other part is that it will be the answer of the Armakolas question. What about the non-Muslims? What about the different groups? I mean, I forced myself and conducted interviews, even the representative of the Shalom organization in every single country. And they very kindly, but very similarly and repeatedly answered that overdose use of Islam with official and non-official state institutions, transnational state institutions, I'm not speaking only Diyanet, but also the other state institutions and the Turkey-originated religious communities in the country, they've been hesitating and afraid in Turkey's new overdose use of Islam just to disturb the very fragile, quote-unquote, secular environments of the Balkans. And this also ended up as a security question. And the last point that I would like to say that after 4 years fieldwork, what I saw that there is one Balkans from the eyes of Ankara, and there is different kind of Balkan countries in the region. Ankara managed to see the Balkans as a bulk of a region and try to and think that for Ankara it would be easy to solve every kind of issues, because in terms of the country's hierarchies and in terms of the maybe Justin Caesar's hegemonic Islam terminology, Ankara can think that solve all of the single problems by one way or another. But when we think that, when we scrutinize the dynamics of the region, every single Balkan country has its own and very different dynamics, very different priorities, and very different perceptions to Ankara, as you said, to China, to the United Kingdom, to US, to the European Union. But still, Ankara seems that he's the only dominant and the biggest actor. It might be like that in the Muslim parts of North Macedonia. It might be like that in the Sanjak region, but it is not the same in Albania. And it's even not the same in Bulgaria. So my book mainly criticized that one-sided view via scrutinizing Turkey's transformation. This is the summary of the book, and I hope I can manage to answer a couple of questions to your questions. And if I can go some of the questions and some of the critics, I mean, Ioannis, Armakolas, you are exactly right. I mean, I know after my PhD dissertation, after 3 external reviewers' comments and my transformation of the book, I burned half of the study. So, as you said, this might be a work only focusing on the transformation of Turkish domestic and the foreign policy while looking at different angles, or it might be a book for the Balkan and Turkish relations, or it might be a book regarding to the instrumentalization of religion, Islam, from the foreign policy perspective. But different priorities, different fears, like to finding a position in the European countries, so on and so forth. I just pushed the book as much as possible and quick. So this is a bulk of the book. But as you said, this is an ongoing project because there are some gaps in the book. For example, what about the Saudis? What about the Iranian role? What about the Gulf countries in the region and Turkey's relation with these countries under the shadow of the global revival, namely who will be the leader of the global ummah? This would be the big part of this story. And these are an ongoing projects that I would like to conduct in the near future.
I suggest we make a pause and give the opportunity to our attendees to ask any question, and then we'll give you the floor again to respond. So is there anybody interested in asking a question? Please raise your hand.
Ersin Hoca wants to have a word, actually.
Yes, okay, Ersin Hoca, please.
I'm unmuted, okay. Thank you very much. I mean, it's a surprise for me to hear that Turkish developments of recent years have left behind a Turkish foreign policy still working in one form or another. I have the impression in Turkey that Turkey has more or less removed itself from any policy making for the last 4 years, since 2017. In all realms of policy making, you know, education policy, health policy, you know, university policies of the Higher Educational Council, and economic policy, which is in a complete mess, as we very well know, and foreign policy likewise, were all relegated to away from the bureaucratic institutional context to ad hoc political decision-making, mainly influenced by one individual. So under these circumstances, talking about policy, of course, makes very little sense. For you need some kind of consistency provided by bureaucracy to have any kind of policy. When you de-bureaucratize, of course, policy gets lost in this mayhem, as far as I can tell. So one question is whether what you have unearthed is still relevant today. We don't hear neo-Ottomanism any longer, not as much as we used to. And my second question is, what is the message that they were giving with neo-Ottomanism? You know, is it re-establishing the Ottoman Empire, which is out of this world? I'm not so sure whether there is any demand for that anywhere, including Turkey, as far as I can tell, where a majority would be behind this kind of idea. What in the name of neo-Ottomanism? After all, Ottomans are a dynasty, a family, you know, and they're not in this game. So what we have is a lot of people touting the values that the Ottomans were supposed to have, whatever they were. Again, very hard to know. So what you're suggesting is that, if I understood you correctly, is that they increasingly started to present or market ideas of Salafism, you know, extreme religious radicalism, in lieu of policy, providing whatever support there was for educating, quote unquote, masses in the correct form of religion, and providing them with a perspective that this was their heritage, which the Ottomans used to do. Again, this is highly debatable. And therefore, the image of Turkey became a country supporting the likes of Daesh or Al-Qaeda or what have you, because of this kind of shift away from some form of secular religious, liberal religious messaging of the earlier period to this more radical political Islamist, Salafist perspective as the new message for solidarity, in which Turkey, if I again understood you correctly, has been involved in competition with Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, etc., who could outdo the other in better forms, etc. So what is the outcome of that? I can understand the security issue, but I would like to see, you know, how well was that received? To what end did it serve? If you get an education in Salafism, what kind of a job do you do? You know, what is it good for? So under these circumstances, it looks like a relatively hollow kind of message, which can indeed do a lot of misdeeds for people who believe in this kind of message and go down that track down that road under these circumstances. So is that the right kind of conclusion that I derived from your presentation? Is that your conclusion?
Precisely. I mean, I would like to give a couple of examples that I found in the book, and it was fascinating, and they changed the direction of the book in the mid of my fieldwork. I mean, I had to prepare some PowerPoints about these photos, but I think you can see that photo. This is the Bulgarian translation of Davutoğlu's Strategic Depth. In 2017, it was my fourth time in Bulgaria, in Sofia. I managed to conduct an interview with the previous ambassador, Süleyman Gökçe. We had a lovely lunch all together, and he tried to understand whether I'm trying to conduct research with Gülen movement or not. I think this is another problematical issue for the foreign ministry and the mentality of the diplomacy. But anyway, he gave me that book as a gift. And I told, I mean, I would like to write all of these into my book. And he gave me a consent form. And after that, after I got this book, I looked for every single bookshop in Bulgaria, not only in Sofia, in every single corner. And they told me that it's impossible to find that book in any bookshop in Bulgaria because they don't like that identity of strategic depth, neo-Ottomanism, or the Turkey's back and Turkey's influence, because there is an issue about sovereignty in here. There is an overdose use of shared past or Turkey's historical readings. This is the problem. So regarding that neo-Ottomanism, I mean, there are different types of reading of neo-Ottomanism, and nobody knows that who is the right one and who is the Turkey's opponent. So in here, I think there are two issues. The first one is that Turkey still, or Ankara, doesn't know what does it mean neo-Ottomanism, and therefore it opened the second issue. It didn't give a direct message about what neo-Ottomanism is that. Is it Özal's policy? Is it Erdogan's? Or is it based on Davutoğlu's academic works or political desires? So there is a confusion regarding this issue. The second photo, again, I think you can see in here. After conducted many interviews in Albania, I'm not lying in here. As an academic, I conduct interviews with the Gülenists. And one of the Gülenists suggests me that you should go to Durrës, or maybe I'm pronounced wrongly. It's a lovely city town in Albania. And there should be a pizza shop named Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I was shocked, and he didn't tell me anything more. I went to Durrës and I sat a lot, and I ate a couple of slices of pizza. And finally, I managed to meet the owner of the pizza shop. He's a Salafist. And I told him, I mean, why did you put your shop as a name of the leader of the contemporary Turkey, as a president of Turkey? And he told me that, yes, we are coming from different sects. Yes, we are coming from different understanding of Islam. And I know that they're not very compatible with our understanding of Islam. But this person, Erdogan, is the only Islamist leader who can fight, compete, and fight for the rights of the Muslims with Angela Merkel, with Obama, with the Western powers. So he is representing and holding the flag of Islam. This is not an indicator to see the whole picture. But I mean, whenever you go to Skopje, you can see one patisserie shop in the Muslim part of Skopje, the northern side of the river, and there is one old lady who is selling baklava and the sweet things. She was described Erdogan as the only Islamic leader in the world. And even though my interviews were previously the Hagia Sophia's opening as a mosque, she argues that Erdogan converted Hagia Sophia from museum to mosque. This is the image that's being conducted. But there is other serious issues. For example, in many different countries, I went to the Salafi mosques and tried to pray with them. Despite of my tattoos, I hide them. And what I saw that they have very positive connotations about Erdogan, because after with the beginning of the fatal conflict between Gülen movement and the Turkey state, or AKP, how you call it, it's based on your reading. But Turkey try to find different ways to eliminate the impact of the Gülen movement. And one way is to push the competition, push the fight to the field of religion, to the field of Islam. And within the field of Islam, Turkey is the lower hand and the Gülen is the stronger hand in the region, because Turkey has been always in the region with diplomats, so on and so forth. But in the religious end, when they realize that they are not that strong, they try to collaborate and funds and try to find different kind of relations with the local, not very moderate actors in the region. But this doesn't mean that Turkey has been pushing the Salafism. Turkey has been promoting the Salafism in the region. This is still, likewise in domestic politics, it is the political incapabilities to make a right decision and to create different kind of unconventional, non-permanent collaboration in the region. At last, what I will say that yes, there is a huge competition between the Muslim groups in the region regarding to make a huge influence to the Muslims. I mean, Balkan Muslims are not that irrational, and they know what they want, and they know how to get benefit from all of these external actors. They can make an investment. If they want a new school or hospital or a shopping center to Saudis, they can make an investment to Erdogan or Erdogan's state agents or state apparatus in the field if they want different things from Turkey. So I think still, I mean, whether from Riyadh, from Tehran, from Ankara, still they saw that they are the glorious leader of the Muslims. No, they are an independent actors, and their Muslim heritage is older and stronger than these Arabic or Ottoman background countries. I hope this satisfies you, Hocam.
Thank you very much.
You haven't quite answered the first question, whether there is still a foreign policy. But you can get back to that after this last question.
I think there is a kind of a foreign policy, because what I saw that foreign policy of the Balkans, I don't know. But for example, around 3 years or 2 years ago, I mean, the Belgrade ambassador was Mehmet Kemal Bozay. He's a very decent diplomat, now the representative of the European Union, and his links, his policies was glorious, was very successful on the name of Turkey. But on the other hand, when I tried to talk with the North Macedonian ambassador, I can't remember the name of the lady, but they told me that he's a political appointment in here. So you can't she can't understand your question. So it's a very political actor. So it is, if it's based on the Turkey's agents' capacities and the desires. This makes, likewise, I said, there's an ambivalence of religious soft power, ambivalence of Turkey's presence. Still, there's an ambivalence of Turkish politics in the region. I mean, I think the concept of ambivalence is still, for me, from my point of view, is one of the key points to understand all of these transformations and other stuff.
Erdi, can I intervene here, or Ioannis, who's running this? I don't know.
Yes.
Just one sentence to Ersin. Well, again, from the perspective of the Balkans, or Western Balkans more specifically, it is interesting that what you mention as the dismantling of all these characteristics that would make a proper state policy and personalization of politics of Turkey is actually very much aligned to what we see in recent years in the Western Balkans. And this is where, for example, when Erdi in the future expands the agenda to see more broadly the relations of Turkey with these countries and the rest of the countries that he hasn't studied, he will see that despite all the differences, religion, this and that, for example, Vučić regime in Serbia may increasingly find Turkey palatable and interesting because of this kind of model that you're describing, which is very much similar to what he's trying to create in Serbia, paradoxically, while Serbia supposedly negotiates to join the European Union. And we see similar trends also in Albania. So there is interesting dynamics there, and Turkey, not as a religious actor, but as a governance actor, may becoming more appealing to these countries, even to countries that could not imagine that they would like to see Turkey more in the region, simply because we have the proliferation of alternatives, because European integration is collapsing, or European enlargement policy is collapsing. Geopolitical role of Western power is weakening, and so on and so forth. So this is interesting dynamics, of course, and of course the book by Erdi raises all these issues, and there will be more chances to go deeper into this.
And just one word, if I would have a chance to rewrite this book, most probably with all of these dynamics, I would add some theories regarding patrimonialism and neo-patrimonialism. And also, I think this is one of the weakest points of the book. I would also add leadership relations, or their effectiveness to each other. I mean, this is one of the missing parts of the book, but I mean, you have many books and you know it's impossible to cover every single point in one single book. So this is, I mean, this is the last time I went to the region. It's the January 2019, and then I conducted some interviews via Skype, and I realized that yes, there are some leadership aspects, but neo-patrimonialism is still regarding to the intersectionality of domestic politics and foreign policy, but it was too late because I'll disturb all the skeleton of the book if I'll inject all of them on top of that.
Yeah, that's why I call Turkey neo-patrimonial sultanism nowadays.
So, we're supposed to conclude at 10 minutes ago, but we have 3 questions. So we'll have to give the floor to Ahmet, Günther, and Uğur. I suggest you ask your questions in a brief manner, and then we give the floor to Erdi to respond to your questions and conclude our event. So Günther raised his hand first, so he goes first, Ahmet, and then Uğur.
Yeah, thank you, Ioannis, and thank you for the presentation. In line with Ersin Hoca's question, if there is still a policy, I would ask if it makes sense, or if it makes sense to look. Let me put it different. Also, in reference to what Ioannis said very rightly, that naturally the political conditions for any kind of religious policy of Turkey towards the Balkan states and towards Muslim migrants in European host countries. Is there a possibility to speak at least of an overall religious policy towards different communities, both in European migrant states and host states and in the Balkans? Is there, at least from the perspective of Ankara, maybe see traces of a joint vision, of a common vision of these different policies?
Thank you, Günther. Ahmet, let's collect the questions, Erdi, so we can wrap up, I suggest, and we can finish in maybe 20 minutes. Ahmet, would you like to please unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a brief comment, actually, following Ersin, who, as usual, hit the nail on the head, but opened the Pandora's box, and I will not dwell on the Pandora's box. But basically, there is this attitude now of justifying the switch from the Ottomanist perspective of Davutoğlu, which was mentioned earlier, of building on a shared past and so on and so forth, to basically see the entire Ottoman area as a justified area of sovereignty. So consequently, one does not really have to develop a policy. And also I agree with Ersin on another aspect of this, that if you are basically comfortable with regard to owning this area of sovereignty, you can change your mind about any aspect of it. And that also ties very well to what Erdi said earlier, that the particular thing about Turkey is that seeing the Balkans as one single area without seeing any national, ethnic, or religious differences in the area. So I think there is a meeting of minds if you really dwell on this aspect of how Turkey is looking at the Balkans. And basically, you also see not only an ignorance, but also resistance to learn, because it is your own sovereign area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmet. Uğur?
Thank you very much for the presentation and also giving credit to my work. Unfortunately, I couldn't read the book yet because I'm expecting a university library to acquire it and I will borrow it. It's a bit, I mean, all books are a bit overpriced for Turkey for the last years. So anyway, I have a question about how salient or visible religion is in Turkey's image in the Balkans, especially when you did your interviews with non-Muslims. For example, methodologically speaking, were you raising the question about Islam and religion while talking about Turkish foreign policy, or were they raising this aspect of Turkey's policies towards the Balkans? Because I think there are some a multitude of phases of Turkey's perception in the region. So I am really curious about how you would comment on that. Thank you.
So unless we have other questions, and I think we don't, so we'll give the floor to Erdi so he can wrap up and respond to the three questions.
May I start from the end and then to reach the
Of course.
First of all, I mean, I can send you the book. I know it's like quite expensive for the Turkish academics, unfortunately, but I would be very happy to send me my book, because I mean, I give you a lot of reference to you and I use some of your reports. I mean, because you haven't read the book yet, so you didn't know what my methodology was. I didn't conduct a survey. I didn't give them a questionnaire and make a tick. Using Ioannis Armakolas, some of the methodological articles, I did a participant observation and I lived in the region around 4 years. I lived in Ljubljana. It's hard to consider it's a Balkan capital, but it's the most livable capital for me. And I traveled every single Balkan country, not only these three countries, by bus, with car, with different types. And I spent huge amount of time with these elites. Therefore, I mean, I prayed with them. And I think it's methodologically fine. For example, I drink raki with Baba Mondi in Albania, and we spent like 4 hours to talk about the Turkish investments. But at the same time, I try to manage to reach the Gülen movement, and using the slow ball technique, always the ambassadors and the foreign office, Turkey's ambassadors suggested me some name. Gülen suggested me some name, and these views are exactly the opposite. But at the end of the day, I try to reach my conclusion. Within these circumstances, indeed, in my long conversations, in long hours, I'm always putting religion in some places, because the title of the book, Religion, Identity and Power, and this dissertation and this book, I'm sorry, after spending lots of time as a dissertation, and this book is mainly regarding whether religious soft power could be different understandings using identity and power. But what I can clearly tell you that whether they are coming from a Muslim background or a non-Muslim or a secular, at the end of the day, one way or another, if you quote and make a critical discourse analysis, you will see the religion or Islam or Erdogan or Diyanet or Gülen movement. They're all religious connotations on the very bold side of the screen. So, I mean, I didn't push or manipulate my interviewers, but they pushed me to reach that ending. Regarding Ahmet Hoca''s question, I mean, I love that word. I mean, this is why you are Ahmet Evin, the resistance to learn the region. This is a very true story, actually. I mean, I was shocked when I talk with the ordinary people in the Balkans, how they've been following Turkish politics, Turkish dynamics. It was so interesting for me. I remember that 16th of April in 2017, I was in Skopje and I joined the demonstration, pro-Erdogan demonstration after the referendum results. They've been following that. They've been following Turkish politics that closely, but we are not following the Balkanic politics in different countries that much. So this is one of the problems. And regarding that neo-Ottomanism, I mean, I'm not insisting and using neo-Ottomanism in the book. I've been categorizing Neo-Ottomanism in different periods, starting from a nascent version of the Neo-Ottomanism during the Özal to the contemporary day. But I think Neo-Ottomanism is not the key concept to define the Turkey's current transformation and presence in the Balkans. Therefore, in the book, I use that Turkey has been implementing coercive, ethno-nationalist Sunnification of its policies. I think Neo-Ottomanism is not a key word to understand that, because I am sure if I would ask you, all of you, and you are, I mean, William Hale is here right now. I mean, if I would ask that, what does it mean, Neo-Ottomanism? Most probably, no, you can't answer that with one single sentences. So this is an abstract concept, so it's not applicable in the region.
Erdi, can I interrupt you for a minute? Kemal Kirici wants to add a point so that you can answer to that too.
Sure. And now I'm coming to the Günther before.
Yeah, I wasn't going to add a point. I hope I'm not distorting Erdi's line of thinking. I was just going to tell him that I'm not in the business of job talks anymore, Erdi, but I do want some tips from you about traveling in the Balkans. And I'm curious if that Rakı session you had, was it Rakı or Rakia?
Rakia.
And I've become very sensitive to all this since I've been reading, Kapka Kasabova's To the Lake, and also her previous book, Border, A Journey to the Edge of Europe. These books have determined my future. I'm going to hop into my Renault Megane and travel in the region. Erdi, I need some tips from you.
Precisely, whenever you want, Hocam. I mean, thanks God, I'm not in a job market anymore. So
don't forget to charge him for this, huh?
Yeah,
okay.
No. I mean, he's very valuable for my wife, Dr. Bahar Bashar. So I mean, he's a special position in our house. I mean, regarding this Günther's questions, I'm not sure whether I received the question well or not. But I mean, as a person who's been working about Islam and foreign policy, not only about the Balkans, I have a couple of works about the different parts of the world regarding Turkey's activities. I've been getting too much questions about this issue, and mostly secular, sometimes some foreigners. I'm not saying that you are that, you know some of the issues of Turkey better than all of us, but I think we are underestimating Erdogan's presence and instrumentalization of Islam, particularly outside the borders of Turkey. He has a presence both in the Balkans and in Western Europe, particularly Muslim minorities and diasporas. This is not only how Erdogan has been instrumentalizing joint Diyanet and other transnational apparatus and the communities very influentially, but this is also how Europe's socio-political integration policies for these latecomers, Muslim diasporas, second, third, or whatsoever generations is not very successful. And indeed, this might be a leftist reading, I'm not, but in terms of the Gramscian theory, there is a lack of the organic intellectuals that would create a link with the Muslim diasporas and the state elites in Europe, and Aristotelian understandings, nature-hate gaps, and Erdogan as a kind of a political animal. He has been in politics more than half century. He and Joe Biden might be the most experienced political actors in the world right now. He saw that gap and joined to the field. So he has exactly a presence and he is successful. I shouldn't underestimate his success in the streets of Berlin. You lived in Paris, in London. I lived in Stockholm. In Stockholm, he is a successful actor in terms of managing and consolidating Muslim diasporas. For example, in the book there is an anecdote. When I was in some of the western parts of France in a train station, I saw a Muslim Kosovo citizen. He talked about how Erdogan is an important Islamic actor. I mean, in the western France, small village, during the late night, we were in a train station, but we talked about Erdogan Islam. This is some issues. And still, for example, in Bulgaria, Frederick Ebert Foundation surveys, still Erdogan is one of the most trusty Muslim foreign leaders. So this is why, or I don't know how I would translate, but they say, ayağına taş değse. I mean, if something happened to Erdogan, we will be in Ankara. I heard that sentences from the Balkan Muslim leaders, from the Balkan civil society leaders, many different times. So that is why, I mean, now I'm watching some Turkish news, Medyascope and all everyone has been celebrating at the end of an Erdogan era. Yes, this will be maybe one day, but what happened to these Muslims? They've been looking to Erdogan. So this is my reading. If I can get your question.
He looked to Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, you know, he did a really good job.
So, unless we have any other questions, I think it is time to conclude. I would like to thank you for joining us this evening in order to have this discussion on Erdi's very interesting book. I would like to thank Ioannis Armakolas for making his presentation and contributing to the discussion. Congratulations again, Erdi, on a very interesting and important piece of work. And
thank you so much for everything.
And I look forward to seeing you in another event of the Turkey program at ELIAMEP. Have a great evening and stay safe and healthy.